Every heroic journey has sacrifices. Every person has moments in their life where they have to make tough decisions.
It's intense. It's emotional.
Hard fights and bitter losses and stuff.
Something about making the decisions, right or wrong, good or bad.
So, how do you want to do this?
Welcome back to D&D Beyond. I am Amy Dallen, and today, in honor of our friends, the glorious shenanigan havers of Vox Machina, they're making it to a new medium this week. They're coming to cartoons for everyone to enjoy, which hopefully means new eyeballs, new audiences falling in love with the world and story that many of us already love of Critical Role. But we also have talked a lot about the fact that you can run your own games in that world. And that is going to be the subject of today's episode. I want to talk with my special guest about running games for worlds that you know, not just source books that you have access to or settings you might have encountered before, but things that you've watched stories play out in. Is that different? How is it different? And how do you deliver as a DM on the fun of that premise for your players? So to come talk to me all about that and answer our questions, please welcome back Aliza Pearl. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great, Amy. So always so good to get to chat with you in any context.
So you, of course, are a writer, creator, producer, performer, all around talented person, and most importantly for us today, a dungeon master. And you and I have played together in some sort of established world type settings, and you've been running a lot of games across the world of TTRPGs with premises like this. So I couldn't think of anyone better to come and talk to me about this. I would love to know. And please, if you have questions for Lisa, pop them in the chat. The mods are going to be passing those along so that we can get into it. But first, just at the biggest picture level, what would your advice be for someone who is planning a game rather than homebrewing it from scratch, rather than using one of the established sort of sourcebook only settings, choosing a piece of media or something that you've watched or seen for an established world to play in?
Yeah, I think the hardest part, if you really truly are picking like your favorite anime or your favorite TV show to run a game in, and there isn't already a setting established, there isn't a system assigned to it already, the hardest thing is figuring out what system to roll it in. So
Mm.
I mean, there's so many adaptations of 5e, like there's Hellboy 5e, which I have started to make plans to run soon. There's tons of there's Neverland 5e, which a lovely friend, Diana Gaeta, and some friends put together a setting for. You can, like, mishmash your setting with your system, but I think the thing to keep in mind is what type of system complements this world the best. Like, if you are very combat heavy, you want a system that is really good at combat and moving things forward through combat. If you're very RP, you might want to go rules light with whichever system you choose. So that's probably the hardest part. If you only know one system, that's actually easy. Just run it in that system, you know. um, and then from there, I think uh it's as a fan of this property that you watch and love, say it's your favorite anime, think about what moves the world and the stories in it. So, like, what have the characters' goals been? How have they succeeded? How have they failed? And think about what types of characters your players might want to create that are kind of inspired by those main characters in the show. And then from there, you think about the villain. So you kind of just like piece together this is the main source. You don't have a source book, but the show is its own source. And then you kind of like extrapolate from there to pull into your own campaign.
I love that, and I think you can draw that advice directly into Dungeons and Dragons, even if you're adapting it for a non-fantasy world or for an established fantasy world. If you want to brew up your own version of something, that is always a thing you can do. It's your table, as we often remind folks. Whatever happens at your table is the correct version at your table. I
Absolutely.
I love what you said about drawing, like looking at how the characters in, let's say, a show that you watch succeed and fail in their goals. I love that angle. I had been thinking in terms of when you are trying to sort of create a game that you want to feel like a tone that you've experienced before. Um, one of the things to ask is try to figure out what are the things that make it feel like example X. What are the things that make, let's say, the show X Files feel like X Files, or the show Supernatural feel like Supernatural? What kinds of threats? What kinds of, do you expect there to be? Does this property feature chases or like really tough wilderness sequences or conspiracies or political elements? Those are things that you might want to make sure are present in the game or the experience you are designing. Like is it, if it's going to be Ghostbusters, what are the things that make something feel like Ghostbusters? And even if they look different
Mhm.
in your game, how will that experience for your players line up with what you are sort of advertising? Would you say it's different in a long game and in a short one?
Yeah, I think so. I think the great thing about doing a one shot in a established world is that you can just throw in all the references, and it's going to be super fun for your players. It's just going to be like, obviously, fan service to your players and yourself as a fan. But also, it just really helps flesh out that one shot. And then if you do a three shot or something longer, like an ongoing campaign, maybe you start that way with establishing the world. Like in my I have a Buffy campaign that's been running for about 9, 10 months now. And I remember early on in our campaign, we definitely established like this is Sunnydale. This is the way Sunnydale was in the show, but it's our own little weird universe of our version of Sunnydale. So we have a coffee shop that we named as our own, but it's next to the Magic Box, which is an established location in Buffy. And it has the history of the Magic Box in the show. And there's Sunnydale High, there's Sunnydale University, there's all the other locations, plus our own unique locations we've added to it. So when you start the campaign, definitely just like fill in that world, paint the picture, and let your players also paint the picture too with what they know about the story and the world. And then as you go on, you don't have to like stick as closely to it because you've established it. Everyone knows the tone, we're playing in the tone, and then you can just sprinkle in like, "Oh, there's a reference to Spike here," "Oh, Drusilla, what is this, like, comic book about someone named Drusilla?" Like, you can just kind of plant those little Easter eggs for your players to find.
Because of course you do want to strike a balance, right? If you have every single main character from an established thing show up immediately, it could feel like your players are sort of sidelined. They're just
Right.
watching all the NPCs have exciting actions, or it doesn't make any sense for them to take center stage on this adventure. But if, let's say, you're playing in the world of Critical Role, and you always have the option to be like, that this player's favorite character is Percy, kidnap Percy. There's your start.
Mhm. Yeah.
Or he sends you on your quest because he doesn't have time.
Exactly.
Um,
And that was gonna say that, and super easy way to is, like, to bring in that established lore and NPCs is have them be the quest givers. That's just, like, so easy. Everyone understands that dynamic as well, like, either being hired to do something or doing a job on behalf of someone to help them restore their honor or to help them save their family or whatever it is. And it's a really fun way to get to RP those characters too, if you've ever
now,
wanted
what
to do that.
which could be intimidating, but can be a fun opportunity because, unlike
Mhm.
in a lot of source books, there's in some cases, canonical version of this that you may find yourself trying to match. But I would say general advice there would be just know that you and your players want it to be good and they'll go with you and they don't expect you to be a perfect impression of anyone. And maybe you'll all fall in love
Mhm.
with your version of that just as much.
Absolutely. I know, I did a Buffy one shot for Halloween last year, and, I had similar to what I just said, like, I had, like, Buffy herself was an NPC in that, who had, like, a pretty prominent role at the beginning and the end, and Xander was also pretty prominent in that, and my impression of Xander, I definitely said some weird stuff, and I was like, "Well, that's Xander today. He's just in a weird mood. He's saying this weird stuff. That's it." And we kind of just went with it. That was Xander today.
Now, are there things to watch out for if you are playing around with established things or things that you have found sort of kill that feeling?
Yeah, well, if you have a table of players who maybe like half of them are really big, big fans of this property, but the other half aren't, or they've only
Mhm.
watched a little bit, then I think it can be kind of a downfall to stick too closely to the lore. So if there are certain rules about certain things in the world that the show or the property does, and some players want to stick really hard to those rules, but a new player is like, well, I just want to do this thing. Does it have to be exactly this way? I'd say just be open to being a little loose with that lore because it's not going to be fun for a person who's never seen a show and is in this world you're establishing together, having to like stick so closely to like minutia of that thing when that minutia might be actually holding back their fun and their creativity.
I think that's great advice. My next question was going to be, how do you deal with different audiences potentially of, we might say the deep fan. In our case, maybe
Hmm.
they've been watching Critical Role for 6 years.
Hmm.
The new fan who literally just saw a cartoon and was like, this is cool. This is a game you can play. I got to do this.
Hmm.
Or the complete non fan who is, the brother of someone who's attending this game and is down to play some D&D but has no idea what you're talking about.
Hmm.
So advice for sort of balancing that together other than just looking for that happy medium?
Yeah, I would say if there is even a sliver of possibility within your rules at your table of them doing that cool thing they want to do that's never appeared in the show, just do it. Just go with it. It is now part of your version of the show. It's going to be so much fun for everyone if you view things that way.
I love that. That's great. Now, uh let's see. Oh, here's a great corollary to that, to the different levels of player knowledge. A question from KB Tibbs. Do you have any
Hi.
advice for GMing a game where a player knows more about the setting than you might? And I'm sure
Oh,
D&D DMs
sure.
have been facing this since the game was invented.
Exactly.
Some of the original creators of this ended up playing in worlds that their own players had created. So this is a classic
Mhm.
D&D question.
Oh, great. Yeah, really great question. Yeah, I think my advice is twofold because it's like don't let your pride shut down the advice and the info that that player provides, but also don't let it become all about them knowing the rules. Um we don't I mean it's not fun for someone at the table to constantly be like uh kind of like monitoring, policing the rules all the time. It can be disruptive. So you don't wanna let
Mm,
it get that far. But if you're a newer DM or GM or yeah, you're in a setting that one of your players knows more about, embrace it. And also let that player I would say encourage them to play a character who knows a lot about the world because then they're just playing their character, right?
mhm.
They're helping the other players. It's like a positive, helpful role for them.
It is I one of the central things with TTRPGs is you're never constrained to play a character who knows what you know or, like I
Mhm.
can play a totally kick butt warrior even though I am not, and that's part of the fantasy. But I will happily say that I have often had it work out well where if you play a high knowledge character in a world you know well, you can really help
Mhm.
everybody out. And if you
Oh,
play
goodness,
a
yeah.
low knowledge character in a world you don't know well, then it can also work nicely where you're just like, it's my first
Mhm.
day out of the small village I was born in. I don't know what the city is called. Please help. And then,
Yeah. Mhm.
it all sort of rolls along the way it needs to.
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's see. We've talked about length, we talked about some source material stuff. What about if there is, for example, with Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, we have a nice, deep, meaty canon guide to one of the continents, at least, of Exandria. So if you are dipping into a critical role based adventure, you do have that in front of you. Is that is it any different from using any other source book?
I mean, I don't think so. Um, I think with any source book, you see what's on the page as a game master, as a dungeon master, you take it in, and as you're building your session planning, you decide what strikes you as interesting and exciting, and also what strikes you as something that would challenge your players in a really fun way. And so I think that applies to any source book you're pulling from.
Hmm.
But then also there's the added perk of if you've been watching Critical Role for 6 years and you know like, "Oh, there's a really cool NPC that's in this particular tavern," you can definitely be like, "Okay, they're gonna have an encounter, but it's gonna be like they're not gonna expect it. This person maybe someone told them, 'Oh, we haven't seen that person in years,' and then they just show up in the tavern, and they're gonna be like, 'Yay!'" So, I think that's a bonus. That's a perk to playing in these worlds that are established with this meaty background.
Hmm. and I guess the other thing that could potentially set it apart is that, and this will be true for some other source books that are based on other media, but where unless if you're playing with folks who know a world from a video game, they might have an element of this. If you're playing with ones that have existed only in sort of modules and text and other play experiences, it's less likely that you all have a shared memory of what the voice of a
Yes.
character comes
Oh,
sounds like.
yes.
It's less likely that you
Mhm.
all have a shared memory of the particular balance of action and humor that you might expect in a certain location. But I think that can be freeing
Mhm.
because truly that's up
Yeah.
to you and your table to sort of find the balance for yourself of what your version of the world looks like.
Mhm. So
Uh, let's see. Would you have advice on helping people who want to sort of, let's say you're watching Vox Machina and you're just like that one with the bow, I want to do that. Obviously it can be a very useful sort of helpful shortcut if you have someone who's responded to that material to be like, all right, you're maybe not going to play that actual character, but we can totally make you someone with a pet bear. That is a thing that can happen in this
Mhm.
game, and here's how it works. Um,
Mhm.
have you found there to be pitfalls? Do people enjoy leaning into that first impulse, or like do they get disappointed that their character isn't exactly like the one that they've seen in the IP?
Yeah, I haven't experienced that, like, a player being disappointed, about not being close enough to the character in the IP. I what I have found is, like, say you want to play someone like Keyleth, and you're like, "Oh, I wanna play someone awkward who has really great, amazing druid power." No matter what you do, you're a different person from Marisha Ray. So how you
Mhm,
play your version of that is gonna be different. And I think as a dungeon master, you can help bring that out in people as well by giving them, an NPC that brings out a different side of them than what maybe they are expecting from a Keyleth type of character. Maybe it's like, I don't know, you have a long lost twin. I don't know if that happened. I haven't seen all of Critical Role, so I don't know if that actually happened. That would be weird if I just guessed that, and it did happen. But yeah, like things like that. So you can no matter where a character starts, even if it's super similar to someone in the property, I think that unique player is gonna bring their own thing to it. And
mhm,
our job as dungeon masters is to, like, hype them up and make them feel really good about it because it is a really awesome thing to just bring your own uniqueness into your character.
mhm. Now, when you're planning out plots for sort of an established world, obviously there's the idea of trying not to get overshadowed by major events, but have you ever tried to sort of do one of these like almost time travel-y weaving into the background of a major event plots? And was there anything that you learned from that?
Oh, goodness, I don't think I've done that. Have I done that?
Hmm.
I'm trying to think in all the no, yeah, I haven't done that in terms of, like, an actual session happening in an important, like, Star Trek or Buffy event. But there have been obviously, like, very strong references to past wars and Star Trek, to past events like Voyager, things happening with Voyager that people knowing about on this side of the quadrant. And with Buffy, our campaign is set in a rebuilt Sunnydale. So it's like near the hell where the Hellmouth was. So that crater, sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen late stage Buffy stuff, that crater is still there. And just a few miles out from it, they've rebuilt Sunnydale inexplicably. We haven't gotten into why. Um,
Hmm.
so no, I haven't done that. That's a cool idea. Now I want to do it.
It's a
Do
potential.
you have any thoughts?
Well, I would one of the first sort of things I ran that was in an established setting was sort of a like, all right, figure out what's happening over here while this major thing is about to happen over here. And it is an
Mm,
interesting balance because you don't want
mhm,
people to feel constrained, but you don't
mhm.
necessarily want them to disrupt the big thing that was going on. And as it turned out, while I was worried about that, that didn't end up being a problem at all because the players were perfectly
Mm.
happy to like deal with what was right in front of them, which was the plot that I was giving them. And so I did get to sort of have my cake and eat it too, of being like, haha, we're in the shadow of these events, but we're not interfering with them,
Yes.
and it all works.
How
And it
fun.
was just sort of there is that, that you could do the silly version of that. You can Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead your way through major events, or
Mhm.
Tag and Bink are dead for the Star Wars version. Or you can do like a serious take an event that happened and sort of give it a here's a side thing, and you're preventing the side thing that would have made it worse or interfered with the heroic victory.
Yes.
Um, it's a
Mhm.
delicate balance to go because your players might want to go rogue and completely change the course of history because that's tempting. But it's it's an
And if that
option that
happens, yeah,
exists
if
for
that
these
happens, it's
stories.
an option. Mhm. Could be very fun as well. That also
We have
reminds me
some.
of oh,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah.
Oh, that
No,
just
go ahead.
reminds me of, towards the end of was it I guess the end of the series, Runaways, Marvel's Runaways, where everything gets timey-wimey and they come back from the future. Sorry, slight light spoilers, but, yeah, the characters end up affecting things that happened in the past because they're their future selves and they know things get worse if this happens, and, that kind of reminds me of that in a way. And then also
And
another
in
thing
worlds
this
with magic and
may
science fiction, those are tools that are potentially available to you.
oh, yeah. Mhm. I know I've played in games like that where we are kind of, like, operating alongside some other bigger thing that's happened. And then also, a few days ago, I ran a dragon game, um, that was Delivery Dragons for, my friend's birthday charity fundraiser, and the last scene was our delivery dragons infiltrating a big gala, and 2 NPCs that had been established throughout the whole session get into they're 2 dragons, like full-size dragons. They get into a fight at this gala, and my delivery dragons did not interfere with the fight. They were like, "We're just gonna steal all the jewels, and no one's gonna notice because those 2 big dragons are fighting." And I was like, "Yes, this is amazing." So, there is a lot of
Oh,
fun to
that's
that
perfect.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, like, the main event is happening over there, but our players are doing this over here on the sidelines, and it's so juicy and fun.
When it works, it's absolutely delicious. Now, you actually hit on something that I had banked as like a here's a potential suggestion. I love the way that you did this, which is when you want to use familiar elements but make them feel unique to your game, you can always go with sort of a like carry a story forward or add a plus one. So if a town was destroyed, in your game, it can be rebuilt. All of that still happened. It's in the history. You have some mysteries to solve, but it feels like it counts without needing
Mhm.
necessarily a bunch of explanation. If you didn't know that this town was destroyed, now you know.
Mhm.
Maybe later you'll find out more about how and why. But there's that's one way to weave in the familiar, but make it stand out for your game. And then you can always sort of your suggestion of like put a coffee shop next to the magic store. If there's a famous location, it has a next door, it has a behind.
Mhm.
You could give the if you want to use the famous proprietor of the store, you absolutely can. If you want to give them a new assistant that you made up, then you've added your piece. You can give a character a new family member. You can plus one to a vehicle or location that people would remember, sort of iterate it out so that it's like 1 degree
Mhm.
removed or improved or altered or changed from what you know, but you still recognize the core of it. And then it can feel
Yeah.
both like it's yours and like it belongs to the world.
Mhm. Absolutely. And another thing is like for Critical Role, maybe there was an NPC that literally only has appeared in one session and you love that NPC. Maybe you play, yeah, maybe you play their family member or their cousin or their business partner. And that's a way for you to like celebrate the history of that show but also, like you said, iterating out. Now you're creating something of your own from that.
Yeah. Let's see. Dennis App says, "What is the most unusual setting that you've ever built off of? Was it successful?"
Unusual setting. Um, I don't know. It, I'm not sure what to consider unusual because it's all, fantasy sci-fi. The most normal world setting I've built off of actually probably is the most unusual for me because everything else is fantasy sci-fi. So I'll talk about that. But I built a setting out of 1940s San Juan, Puerto Rico for a Call of Cthulhu 4 shot. And that was really interesting because, in a way, it is what we're talking about. It is an established setting, 1940s Puerto Rico. All of the culture and music and politics of that time were lifted from reality and put into my setting. And so, of course, there were people who were war veterans and there were people who were agricultural workers, and the new airport was going to be built soon, like true to the history of the island. Um, and so for me, that was unusual because, like I said, I usually am in the Star Trek world. I'm in Buffy. I'm in D&D settings, and those are fictional. So it was unusual for me to pull from like a real time in history. And yes, it did work. I think it did work. I'm actually working on writing that adventure up, like as a something to be shared. And what I'm finding is like, how do I, as someone who has Puerto Rican heritage, make sure that anyone can run this as a module and or as an adventure? Like, I want people to be able to access it and not need to know I want it all to be available to anyone who wants to run it and not have to be a Puerto Rican history scholar or have to do all the research that I did. So that's been like an interesting challenge for me.
Ah, that's fascinating. And way better than my answer, which was also going to be that the most out there thing for me was the most normal, probably when I was running short games in a rule site system and I had to do like a regular high school adventure. And I
Oh
think I
yeah.
ended up adding werewolves just, to get it back to some stuff
Gotta
that I
have
feel
some
like I
sci-fi, right?
understand. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. Um,
Mhm.
uh, let's see. All right, question from Aaron Lore. What if you wanted to play, let's see, okay. Oh, okay. This is a spoilers for Loki, the Disney Plus series.
Okay.
What if you
Mhm.
wanted to play a TVA based D&D game
Ooh.
with the
Mhm.
TVA trying to hunt down the players as variants? And first of all, I'm going to say genius. What a fun idea
I love it.
for why you're
It's
being hunted.
brilliant.
Elisa, what would you do?
That's a Oh, that's a great idea. And so first off, as the dungeon master, I would establish what are some potential timelines that they could jump into. So
Mhm.
have some of those ready to go. But then also maybe even, I've actually started getting really into tables, like rolling on a table and creating my own tables for things that I want to roll on. So maybe for
Mhm.
your Loki TVA series, you create a table of timelines. So one column is era in history, another one is what went wrong, what was weird in this timeline. And then the other one is like, what's the big danger or something like that. So you just roll and you have a new, fresh timeline anytime you're unprepared. If they're like, I want to go in this timeline, you're like, okay, we're going to make that timeline right now.
That's incredible. It's like an amazing variation. You could use some of the inspiration. It doesn't have to be horror tone, but you could use some of the inspiration in Ben Richten's Guide to Ravenloft for sort of landing in these
Mm.
different domains of dread with these different elements. There
Mhm.
is a giant table
Yes.
for getting stuck in the mists and coming out in a random place, but yours with the mix and match elements to create those combinations would be so fun. And I think Aaron Lore is also referencing that we recently did a video on the Echo Knight Fighter, which is a wild mount subclass that draws
Mm.
duplicates of themselves from different gone realities, and in that version you can't necessarily travel there, but in my version maybe you can.
Mhm,
And you could
mhm.
roll on that same table to figure out which of your duplicates show up, and that would
Nice.
be so much fun. It's all coming together.
Yes. Yes, I
Or
love
apart,
it.
I
That's
guess,
a
as the
great idea.
timelines go.
Uh-huh.
All right. um Final thoughts on advice that we might not have covered. I'm skipping through my notes. Do some fan
Mhm.
service, but not too much, so it doesn't crowd it out. The advantage I was going to mention, this is only somewhat tongue in cheek, but if you're playing with people who don't know the world all that well, one of the joys that you get is that you get to deliver the basic world building that a bunch of talented people already did, and your players are going to be like, "That's great! What a cool idea! I got to go to a volcano to destroy this ring. That's genius." And you're like, "Yes, I came
Right.
up with that. Let's do
Yep,
it. It's
thank
gonna
you.
be fun." But,
Exactly.
let's see. You wanna find ways to make let the references shine without taking agency away from your players, comparing it to modules versus homebrew versus building in an IP. Um, you can connect pieces of canon that you've never seen bump against each other. That's one of the big fun
Mm.
things, is that you can take,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
an area that was traditionally scary and a village that was traditionally lighthearted and bring the scary thing to the village and see what happens.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I think
every
with our
existing thing
Klingon
is a hook for your
campaign
creativity. Mhm.
yeah, with our Klingon campaign, Blood of the Void, we had a lot of fun with that because, Klingons are a subset of Star Trek lore and fandom. So if you're a fan of Klingons, you're a fan of Star Trek. but Klingons themselves have a finite amount of established canon. And so that's another thing to consider. So what is there something within Wildemont that you feel like was not, it was barely scratched the surface of in Critical Role? Maybe you dive into that location or that culture or that town and you explode that out and fill it with your own ideas and create your own versions of those people. I was just rewatching the very first like streamed episode of Critical Role when they go to Craghammer, and I was like, "Oh my god, that would be really cool to just have, like, a party of the Craghammer Carvers, like, their military class, and everyone, just play a session as all of them." So that's another thing to, like another angle you could take in your established canon and established media games.
Absolutely. And I think you'll find if you check the introductions to any of these published source books from Exandria to Eberron, that's what people want you to do is to have fun in those worlds, especially if they have put together a source book. I think everyone is delighted to know that other people are inspired by the works and worlds that they put out there. And they would want you to have a great time making it your own at your table. Aliza, where can people find you for more of your thoughts or for some games that you might run?
Yeah, you can find me at Aliza Pearl, Aliza Pearl on Twitter and Instagram. And I don't know, I'm running a lot of stuff and I'm playing a lot of stuff. So just follow me there and I'll tweet and Instagram about them all.
And we will see you next time on D&D Beyond. But if you have a couple more minutes to hang out here, throw us some questions because now is the Twitch after hours portion of our
After
stream.
hours.
As I
Ooh.
we did. Oh, I and there is actually a question I missed. First of all, cool hat, Aliza, an important
Thank
note
you.
from Just Here for Coffee, who's correct. Mhm.
Thank you.
What settings would you want to use the most if you had the players for it? Says Aaron Lore.
Ooh, okay, there's a bunch. So right now though, okay, I've been wanting okay, goodness, where to start? I've been wanting to run an Eberron campaign for a long time, for like 2 years. And I keep putting it off, but maybe soon it will happen. I don't know. We'll see. I really love I love sci-fi and I love fantasy, and Eberron is this cool mishmash of both. It just seems like a really cool setting to play in. So that, um, I want to also I just got a bunch of, oh, we're okay, good. We're not gonna be on YouTube for this part because I just found some, like, under the radar source books that were never published for the Angel RPG, and because I have more
I can
content for
neither confirm
that.
nor deny that you have those, and I don't know.
Yep. Nope.
I mean, I actually don't know.
No,
So
and I don't know where I got no. But because
you
I
found
got
them.
those, I now really want to run, like, an investigation agency Angel style series, and everyone
Ah,
would be and here's the thing, I also love Hellboy, so I had this wild idea this morning to maybe have a mashup, like a crossover Angel and Hellboy investigators. I don't know, it was like a fever dream. But I think that's what I wanna
I love it.
run. And
Oh,
Hellboy is
what an
5e, so
idea.
I would probably run it as Angel and Hellboy mashup in 5e. So if anyone
That's
wants
the
to play
best
those,
idea.
I don't know, tweet me.
Polyphus asks, "What are your favorite tropes to use in constructing a setting?"
Hmm. My favorite tropes are let's see. Hmm. I
I
like
love a little old lady village
haunt.
mayor. That's a go-to for
Oh,
me. That's
yes.
just a
I like I like making glam orcs. Like orcs that are really cute and, beautiful and gentle and, in touch with their feminine side. Um, I don't know if that's a trope, that's one of my tropes. Um, I also I also love history, like the history of a place, whether there's been hauntings at this in this village or, in a certain castle, there's hauntings. Another thing I loved in my D&D campaign that came up was Uh, so, like, revisiting a town and someone's backstory that has changed a lot. and seeing how, like, maybe they haven't been there in 30, 50, 70 years, and your player comes back to their town and just, like, introducing them to all the things that changed. It's really fun. In my D&D campaign, one of my characters did this, went back to his town from 90 years ago, and he's a drow, half drow. And he came back, and back then, 90 years ago, it was more diverse. It was like the population was like maybe 25% drow and then a bunch of other different races. But when he came back, a lot of those other races had left. It was mostly drow. The castle that these I think it was human royalty had been like um very like iron fistedly ruling over this village. They had been driven out, and now the castle had been turned into a marketplace. And I love that visual, and I love that idea that, yes, 90 years later, this castle no longer holds the power and the scariness and the intimidation that it used to. Now it's for everyone. It's literally a place that has opened up for the people. So I love doing that, like shifting what a location is.
Oh, that's great. That's a kind of a time marches on, can't go home again kind of trope
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
I love that. Um I think that about wraps us up for today. Thank you so much for joining me. This was such a blast. One more
Thank
time, where can the
you.
people find you for more good stuff?
At Aliza Pearl, Aliza, on Twitter and Instagram.
Ooh, okay. One late breaking question that's too good to leave out.
Yeah,
Maniferos
okay.
78. If you are running a shared world for multiple tables in the same timeline,
Mm.
how would you
Mhm.
handle one table effectively TPKing the other party? Now,
What?
I'm gonna say,
Whoa.
I imagine if you're like, we're both operating in the same town and this table like fireballed some location that you happen to know the others are at.
Mhm.
I have not run a lot of sort of official Adventurers League type situations. I probably wouldn't let that happen at my table. I would find a
Mm-mm.
way that the fireball did happen, but the people weren't there. Because
Yeah,
unless
or
you
they
have
were protected
explicitly
by
decided you're
something.
PvPing, I don't know.
Yeah, I would definitely, like, have some type of magical, something. Maybe, you listen, you can do so much with an NPC, so maybe wherever that other party was staying, like, an NPC came by and said, "You know, I just think you need a shield of some kind." I don't know. Just, like, give them some magical protection so that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
Because that would suck for the party that gets TPK'd. Nah, nah.
I could see,
That's wild,
unless you're
though.
sort of explicitly playing in a like, you know, everybody agrees that there is wild, unpredictable magic going on and that anything could literally happen at any time. And it just, that could have happened because you rolled something. I could see versions of that that would be fun, but my first impulse is I would
Mhm.
probably just try to prevent that one. That sounds
Yeah.
too rough on everybody. Although,
Mhm.
if you've done that and it worked out great, tweet us and tell us how it worked because it sounds really
Yeah.
intriguing. All right, that will officially call it. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I love having these
Thank you.
conversations. Mhm. And we will
Awesome.
see you next time on D&D Beyond.
It's D&D.